The first time Emma looked at me like that, I realized I had been lying to myself for almost a year. She stood in the hallway of our tiny apartment wearing a simple blue dress, one hand nervously holding the edge of the fabric, the other tucked behind her back. I looked up from my laptop and told her the dress looked beautiful. She smiled, but it wasn't the shy, grateful smile I expected. Instead, her eyes softened, and she whispered, "You didn't mean the dress." Then she walked away, leaving me sitting there with my heart pounding because, somehow, she had understood everything I had been too afraid to admit. My name is Daniel, and for the previous 11 months, Emma had been my roommate, my closest friend, and the person who knew almost every version of me except the one that mattered most. We had met through a mutual friend after my old roommate moved out unexpectedly. Emma needed an affordable place after her engagement ended, and I needed someone who could split the rent. It was supposed to be temporary. 2 strangers sharing a kitchen, a bathroom, and a few awkward conversations until one of us found somewhere else to go. But life rarely follows the plans we make when our hearts are still uninvolved. At first, Emma and I barely spoke. She worked at a small bookstore downtown and often came home exhausted, carrying the faint smell of coffee and old paper with her. I worked remotely for a marketing company, spending most days staring at a screen and pretending deadlines didn't scare me. Slowly, the apartment stopped feeling like 2 people renting the same space. Emma began leaving a cup of coffee beside my laptop when she knew I had an early meeting. I started cooking extra dinner because I knew she hated coming home to an empty refrigerator. We developed ridiculous little traditions without realizing it. Friday nights meant cheap takeout and terrible movies. Sunday mornings meant cleaning while music played through the apartment. When either of us had a bad day, the other somehow knew before a word was spoken. But there was one thing I never allowed myself to say. I was falling in love with her. I noticed it in the smallest moments. It was the way Emma laughed with her whole face when something genuinely amused her. It was the way she always remembered birthdays, favorite snacks, and tiny details other people forgot. It was the way she encouraged me when I doubted myself and never made me feel weak for admitting that I was struggling. But most of all, I loved the version of Emma that appeared when she thought nobody was watching. She would stand barefoot in the kitchen late at night, humming softly while making tea, completely unaware of how beautiful ordinary life looked around her. I never told her because I was terrified of destroying what we had. Emma had already been hurt once. Her former fiancé, Jason, had left her after years of promising they would build a life together. She rarely talked about it, but sometimes I would see the sadness return to her eyes when she received an unexpected message or passed a wedding shop downtown. She had started believing that people eventually left, and I couldn't bear the thought of becoming another person she had to lose. So I became careful. Too careful. When she looked beautiful, I complimented her earrings. When she changed her hairstyle, I mentioned that it suited her. When she dressed up, I talked about the outfit instead of the woman wearing it. I thought I was protecting our friendship. In reality, I was hiding behind it. Then came the evening of her sister's wedding. Emma had spent weeks preparing for it, but as the day approached, she became increasingly nervous. Her sister had always been the confident one, while Emma had grown up feeling like the quiet daughter standing a step behind everyone else. She worried that people would compare her to the bride. She worried about seeing Jason's friends. Most of all, she worried that everyone would look at her and see a woman whose life hadn't gone according to plan. That afternoon, she came out of her bedroom wearing the blue dress. It wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. The dress was soft and elegant, falling just below her knees, with delicate sleeves and a simple waistline. Her hair was pinned loosely, and she wore a pair of small silver earrings. For a moment, I forgot what I was doing. She noticed me staring and asked whether something was wrong. I shook my head and told her she looked beautiful. That was when she smiled and said the words that changed everything, "You didn't mean the dress." I tried to laugh it off. I told her she was imagining things. But Emma didn't argue. She simply looked at me for a few seconds, as if she had been waiting months for me to stop pretending. Then she said something that stayed with me long after she left for the wedding. She told me that sometimes the way a person looks at you says more than anything they could possibly say. I didn't sleep that night. At 3 in the morning, I finally admitted the truth to myself. I wasn't afraid Emma would reject me. I was afraid she would accept me, because then our friendship would become something neither of us could return from. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen table. Emma had written that she needed some time at her sister's place. She said she had realized she couldn't keep pretending everything between us was ordinary. My hands went cold. For the first time, I understood that silence could hurt just as badly as honesty. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the courage to tell someone what they truly mean to you, take a moment to like this story, share it with someone who needs to hear it, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more heart-touching stories. Sometimes one kind word can change a person's entire life. The following week was the longest week of my life. The apartment felt enormous without Emma. Her shoes weren't by the door. Her mug wasn't beside the sink. There were no little notes reminding me to buy milk. Every room seemed to carry an echo of her presence. I kept reaching for my phone to tell her something funny before remembering that she wasn't there. On the 5th evening, someone knocked. It was Emma. She stood outside holding a cardboard box filled with some of her things. Her eyes were red, and for a moment neither of us knew what to say. She eventually admitted that she had been thinking about us, about the past year, and about the way I always seemed to see her when everyone else looked through her. Then she told me something I had never expected. She had known. Not everything, not at first, but enough. She said she noticed the way I remembered when she was overwhelmed. She noticed that I always saved the last piece of dessert for her. She noticed that whenever she talked about herself as if she were somehow less worthy than other people, I became angry, not at her, but at the idea that she had learned to see herself that way. Then she confessed that the reason she had smiled in that blue dress wasn't because she was sure I loved her. It was because she desperately wanted to believe that I did. That sentence broke through every wall I had built. I finally told her the truth. I told her I had fallen in love with her slowly, quietly, and completely. I told her I had been afraid that saying it would cost me the most important friendship I had ever had. I told her that when I said the dress was beautiful, I wasn't lying, but the dress had simply given me an excuse to say something I didn't know how to say. Emma cried. So did I. But those weren't the tears of heartbreak. They were the tears that come when two people finally stop pretending they are fine with living halfway. Nothing magically became perfect after that. We didn't suddenly become the couple from some movie where every problem disappears after one confession. We were still two imperfect people carrying old fears. Emma still struggled with the wounds Jason had left behind. I still worried that one wrong step could ruin everything. But now we talked about those fears instead of hiding them. Months later, we moved into a slightly bigger apartment together, not because we were trying to rush into some perfect future, but because we had finally learned that love wasn't about avoiding risk. It was about choosing honesty even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. One evening, Emma wore that same blue dress again. She walked into the living room and asked if I remembered it. I smiled and told her I could never forget it. She laughed and asked whether I still thought the dress looked beautiful. This time, I didn't look at the dress. I looked directly into her eyes and told her that the dress had never been the beautiful part. She smiled the same way she had that first night, except now there was no uncertainty behind it. And I finally understood something I wish I had learned sooner. Sometimes the people we are most afraid to lose are the people we have to be brave enough to love honestly. We spend so much time protecting relationships from the truth that we forget truth is often what gives them a chance to survive. Emma didn't need someone to convince her she was beautiful. She needed someone to remind her that she was worth choosing, even after someone else had failed to choose her. And perhaps that was what love really meant, not finding someone without scars, but seeing those scars and still deciding to stay. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps these stories reach someone who may be quietly struggling, wondering whether they are still worthy of being loved, chosen, or given a second chance. And before you go, comment, "I choose kindness," if you believe everyone deserves someone who sees beyond their appearance and reminds them of their worth. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say to someone isn't, "You look beautiful." Sometimes it's simply, "I see you. I value you. And I'm not going anywhere."